Check one, check. Check. 5:56.
Check two, check two. Camera check two.
Check three, check three. Audience microphone.
Sound check, sound check. Good evening and welcome. My name is Angie Banks, and I am the Chief Financial Officer for the St. Louis Public Schools. This is our Budget Forum series. This is the second of 3 forums. The third forum will be held on December 18th. It's on a Saturday at 9 a.m. You'll be able to find this presentation posted on our website. In addition, you can also find our current year, fiscal year 2022 detailed budget posted as well. I'll spend about 15 or 20 minutes on this presentation, and Dr. Adams and I will be available for questions afterwards. Here is the agenda we'll cover at a high level, including our strategic initiatives which drive the budget development process, community participation that we've had over the last several years and which we anticipate for this year as well. The current year upgrade and ESSER II plans, preliminary fiscal year 2023 budget, including revenues and expenditures, and finally, we'll enlist your recommendations and suggestions for next year's fiscal year 2023 budget, and then respond to any questions you may have. Our strategic initiatives. Transformation Plan 3.0 is the district's strategic plan. All initiatives must align with one or more of the 5 pillars of Transformation Plan 3.0 to support excellent schools, advance equity and fairness, cultivate cultural responsiveness, focus on student reading as our core, and collaborate with our partners. Our budget development process. These are the high-level steps of the budget process every year, starting with alignment to the transformation plan. Budget development starts with planning, and that's the phase that we're in right now. There are also several other phases of budget development, from planning to preparation, adoption, implementation, and evaluation. You can see a general time frame for each of these phases on the graphic in the lower right-hand corner of the slide. It is an iterative process where we make adjustments and improvements each year and along the way based on events that may influence the process, such as a pandemic, consolidation, community feedback, etc. Community participation. Over the past few years, we have marketed heavily through our website, social media outlets, newsletters, principal messaging in the American, and several other places. We've offered 3 forums each year and responded to questions. We've also posted videos on our website. We've had several consolidation meetings, ESSER surveys, and other feedback opportunities like Let's Talk or our new feedback line, We Hear You. Again, we welcome your feedback and suggestions for next year's fiscal year 2023 budget. So getting right into the numbers, starting with the fiscal year 2022 budget. Here is the revenue budget by fund category. We have 5 fund categories which are grouped into similar fund types. You can see those 5 types on the graphic on the right-hand side. The general operating budget is the largest fund category at 68%, and it includes most of the property taxes, sales taxes, our state basic formula and transportation, Medicaid, and several other smaller revenue sources. The state and federal grants category makes up 19% and includes all of our entitlement funds, including Title I, II, III, and IV. It also includes special education, early childhood special education, adult education, Perkins, and our most recent ESSER funds, elementary and secondary schools emergency relief funds, and there are a few others. Debt service at 7% of the revenue budget is made up primarily of property taxes. Food service represents 4% and is mostly federal and state reimbursements for our food service expenditures. Our local grants category at 2% includes the St. Louis Public Schools Foundation, Parsons Blewett, private donors and contributors, and other small local grants. Of course, we consider all the revenues to be important and to play a role in our students' success. Fiscal year 2022 expenditures. We have 6 object categories for our expenditures. You can see them listed on the right side of the graphic. Salaries are the blue and largest slice of the pie at 42%. And in addition to regular wages, includes costs for substitutes, temporary staff, extra service pay, overtime, and summer school. Benefits in orange is the next biggest slice at 20%, which includes district paid pension, Social Security and Medicare, and our health benefits. So our total payroll expenditures, including salaries and benefits, comprise 62% of the expenditure budget. Purchase services at 19% of the budget includes all purchased professional services, property services, transportation services, communication services, insurance, dues and memberships. Some districts have a larger percentage of their budget in payroll. We have some of our larger costs in purchase services. For example, transportation. Some districts have their own in-house transportation, which would account for larger payroll expenditures. Our next category, supplies and materials, are 9% of the expenditure budget and include everything from general and operational supplies, standardized tests, textbooks and instructional supplies, trophies and incentives, uniforms, and furniture, computers, and laptops that cost under $1,000 per unit. You may be surprised that electric and natural gas utilities are also included in supplies and materials. Capital outlay at 4% includes depreciable assets and individual items costing more than $1,000 per unit. Included in this category are land and building improvements, equipment, furniture, computers, and computer software over $5,000. Long and short-term debt at 6% of the expenditure budget includes principal and interest payments on our $200 million of outstanding general obligation bonds. Fiscal year 2022 upgrade plans. This is just a reminder of our upgrade plans, many of which were a result of the consolidation and community feedback. Most of these plans are funded by the general operating budget, with the exclusion of some salaries that are funded in other funds, including the reading teachers, family community specialists, and the bottom bullet, ESSER 2, is a separate fund in and of itself. Many of the upgrade plans are well underway, and you probably all know that we've had staffing shortages that we're still trying to fill. At the end of each bullet in green, you'll see what the upgrade plan was. When the ESSER 3 dollars, the American Rescue Plan dollars, were announced, we increased the ESSER 2 budget from $20 million to $46 million. That's the full allocation. Other additions made that aren't on this slide include an increase to the extra service rate from $25.52 an hour to $40 an hour. We also increased the overtime rate from time and a half to double time for all hours in excess of 40 hours per week. In addition, the long-term substitute rate was increased. Those are the most significant changes to the upgrade plans. This slide demonstrates the significant investment the federal government has made into public K-12 education in response to the pandemic. Over $200 billion. Yes, that's B, billion. St. Louis Public Schools will be the recipient of over $160 million. To date, we have spent the $10.7 million of ESSER 1 funds, and we rolled out the ESSER 2 budgets last month. We anticipate reimbursement from E-rate of at least $2.5 million, and we will begin planning in earnest for the ESSER 3 spending we anticipate for fiscal year 2023, and fiscal year 2024. ESSER goals. I'm sure you've heard plenty about ESSER and the overall goals, but as a reminder, they're to be used for the safe reopening and ensuring the safety for students and staff, for unfinished learning, both pre and post-pandemic, and building lasting, equitable systems of teaching and learning. Dr. Adams has presented on our ESSER II funding plan. Of the $46 million, 4% or $1.8 million will be for indirect or administrative costs. We wanted to make sure as much as possible went into the classrooms, so we budgeted 55% or $24.2 million to school budgets and 10% or $4.4 million to the academic office. 25% or $11 million was budgeted in operations and facilities, and 5% or $2.2 million each to student support services and technology. Part of the ESSER plan is to ensure that historically underserved populations receive additional resources. The district identified 5 student categories and the ESSER funding for those students. The demographics of each student will indicate the amount of funding for that student that will go into the school budget. Since all students were impacted by the pandemic, all students will be allocated a minimum of $875 of ESSER II funding. All students that also receive free and reduced lunch will be allocated an additional $263 of ESSER II funding. Students with an individual education plan, an IEP, will receive an additional $438. And the same is true for that student if they are homeless or a student in transition or an English language learner. So if a student fit into all 5 categories, the school would receive for that student 2,452 categories. Each school has plans to ensure that their student body receives the resources that are most appropriate for them. The schools have included their building steward and their PTO president or designee in their ESSER II plan. So that's the ESSER II per student allocation. Here it is for some of our other funds. For our general operating budget, or GOB, the per student funding is $172.50 per student. And those are for discretionary funds, so that does not include the school staffing. For Title I funds, each student would receive $580 to $830. And that's how the budgets are built at the school level. So that takes us into fiscal year 2023. Now there's a lot of information on this slide, so breaking it down somewhat. Starting on the left-hand side. At the top, we have our revenues broken into 4 categories: local, county, state, and federal. Then our total revenue line, followed by expenditures on the bottom. Those same categories we discussed before. The next column is the fiscal year 2021 projected actuals. The next column, fiscal year 2022 are the approved budgets with some additions. Next, we have fiscal year 2023, which is a preliminary budget. The next column shows the budget percent of the fiscal year 2023 budget. And finally, on the far right, the prior year change indicates the change from fiscal year 2022 to fiscal year 2023. So for fiscal year 2023, the total budget for revenues is about $487 million. For expenditures is $469 million. You will note on the fiscal year 2023 revenues, the change from fiscal year 2022 is about $49 million. Clearly, the major increase is due to the ESSER 3 funds under the federal category, $50 million. Our total allocation in ESSER 3 dollars is approximately $103 million. We anticipate that we will spend approximately $50 million in fiscal year 2023 and $50 million in 2024. We also have some increases in fiscal year 2023 in local revenue, about $3 million. We anticipate additional property tax revenue, a little bit in county revenue, and some reductions in our state revenue, which would be our basic formula funds. When we get to our fiscal year 2023 expenditures, we know that we have included in the salaries the negotiated rates for salaries and also for minimum wages. Those are assumptions that are built into the salaries. However, other than that, we spread out the cost or spread out the expenditures between purchase services, supplies and materials, and capital outlay. And that's primarily for those ESSER 3 funds. Those are the ones in question. What are we going to use those funds for over the next 2 years? So this gives a nice 3-year view of how the budget is trending. And this is where we want your feedback on how we're going to use those fiscal year 2023 funds. So, again, we know we're including the negotiated salary and minimum wage increases. We will be evaluating our current year spending and the effectiveness. So things that are working well, we will continue into the future years. If things are not working so well, we'll make some changes. We do know there are a number of programs and services that will certainly continue. Transportation, maintaining the facilities. We do have some ESSER 2 plans. Some of that may continue into ESSER 3. But this is where we want your feedback. What do you think the district should be doing with these funds? This is a real opportunity for the district to make some significant changes that will impact the success of students, not only this year and the next 2 years, but into the future. So this concludes my presentation. Thank you for your attention. The lines are open and we want your feedback. You can always go to our new feedback line to continue to enter your questions and comments, and we will be happy to respond to any questions that you may have. Thank you. Again, thank you for your attention. We look forward to hearing from you, and good night.